Hi there, my name is Katie Bartz from SewingScene.com, and I'd like to welcome you to another episode of Inkscape Extreme Beginning Tutorials. Today's tutorial will deal with drawing a sailboat. Well, hi there. I am so excited about taking a little bit of a different turn here and get away from text and fonts just for a moment and get you actually designing and drawing some artwork, whether it's for your cutting machine or for digitizing for your embroidery machines. We're going to start out real basic, and I'm going to give you some real basic tips and tricks to get you excited, and you will all be able to create this sailboat when you are done with this exercise. So I'm really, really excited. So let me go ahead and delete this. You will see that I've attached a link for a download for a sailboat file that I did draw earlier. So I would like you to go to the File menu and you select on your import, and wherever you saved it, you're going to open up the sailboat toot outline.jpg. And then you will get a message that will pop up. It says you want to import this JPEG, and I just want you to go ahead and take the defaults. You'll probably do that more often than not, so just take the defaults, and then it will load the JPEG file. And I know it's a JPEG and a raster file and not a vector file because you can see the jaggedness of this particular drawing. And if I take you up here to the View menu, I go to Display Mode, and then I look at Outline, you get nothing but just a blank red X, meaning that it's not a vector. If it was a vector drawing, you'd actually see the outlines of that drawing, that vector drawing. So let's go back to View, Display Mode, go back to Normal, and we can see here is the drawing. Now, I'm going to introduce you to layers. And I'm going to show you this because this is rather than creating a drawing from scratch, if there's something you see in a magazine or, there's a coloring book or things you want to use for your own personal use, you can scan in images such as, I drew this one, but you could scan in an image, and I'm going to show you how to create a drawing from an existing image so that it is vector, and then the possibilities are endless. So let's talk about layers for a moment. I want you to make sure your desktop is set up here, your workspace, so that we're on the same page, okay? And in order to do that, I want to, again, make sure we go to the File menu, go to Document Properties, and again, this is way back in the very first tutorial, but we'll just walk through it really quickly. I am going to go ahead and put my display units here in inches so you can see. Most people will understand inches. We want it in portrait mode. I am going to turn off the show page border so the outline of that page will disappear and it will just be less confusing to work with. The next thing I want you to do is go to the View menu. On the Zoom option, I want to make sure that you have it set 1:1. So what you see on your screen is comparable to what the actual measurement is. And then we want to set up our properties windows here on the side. If you don't have these properties windows set up correctly, we want to make sure, and again, go to View and make sure Custom is selected. That will get rid of the toolbar on the right-hand side of the screen and allow us to put our little property windows there. So select Custom. And then for the shortcut menus, I want you to make sure that you have this here, edit objects, gradients, arrowheads, etc. So for our stroke properties, I want to make sure that's selected. I want to make sure your align and distribute objects is selected. And finally, we're going to click on View Layers. So if we go over here to the Properties window, you'll see that Layers is one of the property windows here. And we have our fill and stroke here, and we have our align and distribute here. Sometimes your windows won't be layered very, very nicely when they're here. And if you click on this little icon in the left-hand side of where the title of that particular properties window is, if you click on that and you get a crosshair, you can actually pick it up and move where you want those windows to be. You can actually see the outline of how that window is going to be. So if you don't see them all open, what I want you to do is just layer it so that it's laying horizontal across the whole thing here. So if it's centered like that, I can release it and it will place my windows of the properties here so that you can actually work with them. If not, they just collapse, and if you just click on the bar here where it says align and distribute, then the window will pop up. But since we're only working with 2 or 3 windows here, it's kind of nice to have those property windows open. So don't be afraid to manipulate them and move them around. We can X out of them to close, and we can reopen it. If I want the align and distribute back open, usually it comes back the way that you close it. But if not, again, just put your mouse pointer on the little icon to the left of what that properties window is and click. When you click and hold, you get the crosshairs, and then you can pick it up and move it to wherever you want. So you can see I dropped it where that was going to be. So let's pick that up again and bring it down and kind of center it, and now it's centered the way I want it. Okay, and we can actually size this property window here also larger or smaller by grabbing the little double-headed arrow here. So we want just a nice workspace. So now that we have our objects here on the screen, and it is actually in layer 1, so we'll always have one layer in a document when you start working on it. And to stay organized, you kind of like to work with multiple layers. And we're only going to work with 2 layers today. One that actually has the image that we're going to trace from, and secondly, the layer that actually has all the drawing objects on it that we're working on. And the reason I want to do that is I don't want that bottom layer to move. Now layers are kind of like if I describe a sandwich, a BLT sandwich. You have your outer bread, you have your bacon, lettuce, tomato, you might have mayonnaise on there. So you have different layers to your sandwich. And you can actually change the order of that sandwich. You can have an LTB sandwich, lettuce, tomato, and bacon, simply by opening up that sandwich and swapping the layers out. That's exactly what layers are in a vector drawing program. They are individual, I will call, sheets of paper. If you remember the transparency projectors when you were in school, they probably don't even have those anymore, but there was a plastic film of paper-sized plastic that you could write on. And if you just lay one down and start writing, you could lay the next one on top of that and write something else. It won't remove what was on the previous layer. It just layers it on top like a sandwich. And that's exactly what layers are in here. So for example, if I come over to this layers area, you can see that I have, it's called layer 1. You can give it a different name if you like. There is a padlock here, so you can lock the layer, and there is a visibility icon, so I can turn on or off that layer that's in here. So if I want to work with that later, I can. You also have the capability here to add a layer or to subtract a layer. So those will be adding and subtracting a layer. These arrows move the layers up and down, or you can simply click and drag the layer once you have multiple layers in there. And then what I really like to have visible here is this opacity, because I may want to just click on this opacity so you can see that that sailboat is getting lighter and lighter. And I just want it faint enough so I can see the outline of this sailboat, because I'm going to draw over the top of it. Because this is, again, not a vector drawing, and I want to create one for my embroidery software for digitizing and or my cutting machine. So I've decrease the opacity, and then what I want to do is come up here and lock that layer. So if I try to select this item, clicking on it with my mouse, I can't select it. It's protected. There's no way I can move it out of place and mess up my drawing. So what I want to do next then is actually create another layer. And it's gonna come up with a default number, but I'm gonna call this one drawing. Click on add, and then you can see now I have a new layer. It says drawing, and I have this layer 1 with the actual image here, and again it's locked, I can't access it. But if I select a tool, for example, I can draw on this layer because this layer is drawing. If I turn the visibility off, you can see that what's here is the square no longer because I turned the visibility off, and then I can turn it back on. Layers make it so nice because maybe you have a drawing and maybe later you want to add some text. Maybe for a cupcake you want to add text that says happy birthday, and then maybe you have another customer or another person you want to make another cupcake for, but they want to say happy second birthday instead of just happy birthday. You can make different layers and turn them on and off, and then either create the cut file or embroidery file from those different layers by turning them on and off. Or if it gets cluttered, if I have a lot of different objects here, in different colors, and I can't see the next thing to draw, I can turn that layer off and then create another layer and draw another portion of that diagram, right? So let's go ahead and turn that layer on. I'm going to select these items and press my delete key to remove them. So one of the easiest ways to create a drawing is to actually draw over something. Like I said earlier, if you have a coloring book or an image in a magazine or some kind of book that you like, you can scan it in and create an image from it. Another sample would be a real simple logo. Maybe you've been tasked to digitize a logo for somebody. Well, the easiest way to do that is to scan in their logo if they don't have artwork for you, and then bring that on a separate layer, lock it, and then on the other layer, continue to draw that image. And this is going to be fun because I'm going to show you how to create this sailboat from very simple, basic objects. So we'll use circles, triangles, rectangles, and that's about it. And show you how to manipulate them once they're a path or a vector object to make this particular image. So again, I'm excited and we're going to have some fun. So just to review, we've brought in our image onto layer 1, we've locked it, and you can turn that layer on and off by clicking the visibility icon. And then we created another layer by clicking the plus here, created a new layer, we called it drawing. Now if we look at this image, right, you're going to learn to look at images just a little bit different. We could see that if we were to continue drawing the main part of the boat here, it would be an oval. So that is the first object we're going to create. So I'm going to come over to my circle and ellipse tool, select that, and I'm going to click and drag an oval that just about covers the object. Now I can't see the lines behind it to see how big this particular oval needs to be. This is where the strokes, the fill and stroke properties comes in handy. So I'm going to change up here and go back to my select tool. And if I come over to the fill and stroke tab, you will see there is also an opacity setting down here. And if I just click at the 50% mark, that you can see that it's lightening up that red, and I can see through this ellipse here, and I can see the boat coming through the bottom. So now I can actually pick this ellipse up and size it, Now if I hold my shift key down, remember if you hold your shift key it sizes it in from the left and the right at the same time. I can size both sides in at the same time, and you can see now the bottom of the boat has this particular shape. So this is going to be the perfect shape for this particular object. Now I have to worry about this curve right here. Well, that's going to be another circle or ellipse. So if I come over to the circle and ellipse tool, again I click and drag. You can see that the transparency is still turned on because I have a lighter pink here, and we have it turns red because it's duplicated. But just for fun, let me go ahead and change that to an aqua so you can see the two different objects separately. I'm going to go back to my select tool, and you can see that right here, if I zoom in a little bit, I don't have this ellipse matching exactly quite right. So I'm just going to click on and drag this ellipse down a little bit and move it up until I have the shape the way that I want it. So that is too far, so let me just grab the top here and pull that down, make it a little bit longer and narrower, and when I do that you can see that it is about, it's approximate, about the top of that boat right there. Right, so that's the exact size that I want it. The beauty of Inkscape and working with objects is you have the capability to use other objects to cut through existing objects. So for example, this blue ellipse here, I can kind of think of that as a die cutter, and I want to be able to cut through this pink circle so that I end up with this shape here on the bottom. But I would also end up with this shape here on the top. And then the next step that we need to have is we need to be able to create this ellipse again so that I can create the top of the bottom of the boat here. So I need actually two ellipses on top here. All right, you could do it one at a time and redraw it, but I just want to show you some shortcuts and to get you through this tutorial so you can start drawing and cutting or digitizing. So if I right click on that object, I have the option to duplicate that object. Control D will do the same. So from now on, I am going to use the shortcut keys, Control D rather than right clicking. And I'm going to turn this one green. So I'm going to take this object, this green object that's on top, and then I am going to hold my shift key and I'm going to click on that red object on the bottom. Now if I point you over here to the Align and Distribute menu, you will see that the relative to last selected is in this drop down. That means whatever I last select is going to have the effect applied to it. So if I wanted to align these objects, through their centers or whatever, it's going to align it to the bottom or the last selected item that I selected. So everything's going to line up to that red oval. If I want to take this object and cut through this object so that I end up with the bottom of the boat left, I want to make sure the top is selected first, the green, and then I hold my shift key, click on the red oval, which is the last selected. Then I can go up to the Path menu, and when I select Path, I'm going to go down and select Difference. Difference takes the topmost object and cuts it through the last selected. All right, now there's help in the help menu. You can read the manual and read about each one of these different objects in here. Difference is one you're going to use on a regular basis. So that takes this green section and cuts through the red. So if I click on difference, now I just have the aqua left. And if I just, to show you, just move that to the side, it took that green oval and it cut through this pink. Right, so let me press Control Z to bring that back because we're going to need that again in a second. Again, if I hold my Control key down on my keyboard and scroll the wheel on my mouse, I can zoom in and out. And the reason I want to do that is I want to show you if I click on this red oval, it selects this whole oval. It's still one object. So the next thing I'm going to do is go to Path, and there's an option here for Break Apart. So it will take each individual item that is on the screen and break it apart. So now if I click on the bottom, I just have this bottom portion here. Click on the top, that's separate because it broke apart. So I can actually delete the top. I don't need that anymore. I just need this part. And then the next thing you want to do is make the top of the boat. We're going to use this same shape because we want to mirror this cut that we had here. So if I click on that aqua oval and I hold my Control key down and I click and drag, it's going to drag it straight down. It's not going to go left and right. And I am just going to click and drag it down until it's about where I want it to be. You can see this is off just a little bit the line of the boat. That's okay. But now by using this method, it's going to be perfectly symmetrical. And then once I've selected the aqua, I'm going to hold my Shift key and click the red. Go back to the Path menu, and this time we're going to select Division. Division is going to take that aqua oval here, and it's going to slice or cut and divide this red portion of the boat here. So I'll go to Division. Okay, and now I have actually two objects. I have the hull of the boat here and the rim of the boat. I'll press Control Z and then let's change the color of both these objects. So I will go ahead and change that top to a light gray, and we'll change the hull of the boat to more of an aqua. All right, so I'll deselect everything, and the next thing I'm going to do is go ahead and make the sails. The sails are two different triangle shapes, so we're going to use the polygon tool once again, and I'll show you a really cool little trick on creating the sails. So we'll select the polygon tool, and again the polygon is selected. We want three corners, and we are going to go ahead and draw a triangle, and I'm going to go ahead and bring the opacity down to about 50% again. So I'm going to select the opacity tool and drag that down, and let's change this to a different color just so we have something different to work with. So I will go ahead and use a yellow, and now this, if I select the Edit Nodes tool, this object is not a vector graphic. Okay, it just has a one node. We need to have three nodes on this particular object. So we're going to go to Path, Object to Path, and now this is a vector object. I'm going to use my Select tool and drag this over the top of the other image, and I'm going to size it left and right so it's larger left and right, and again drag the top up so that it's taller than the existing sail that is there. Now that it's a vector object, when I select Edit Nodes tool, I can actually take this node and bring it to the edge of this flagpole. And the same thing over here, I can bring this node down to that corner and click and drag this node to that corner. I'm going to zoom in here a little bit, and if I place my pointer, the mouse, on the edge of this triangle and click and drag, I am able to shape that sail close to what is there. And the same thing here with the bottom. I'm just going to click on that and drag it up. Now these handles are available because it is a vector object right now. So they have control over its sizing and shaping. So you can also adjust the sail by those handles on the corners. Let me choose the select tool once again, and I have the major sail here, but I want to make two sails right here. So I'm going to make a duplicate of this sail, and the shortcut is Control D. I will go ahead and change the color of that to green. I have the transformation tools available because I have it selected, and if I click again, the rotation tools are available, and I'm looking for this crosshair. Okay, so that's available when you have the rotation tools available. I want to change the rotation of this green sail. So I move the crosshair here so the center of rotation is at that crosshair point. I can then click and drag the rotation tool, and when you see that, you can see that the rotation point here is at the crosshair, and this is just swinging like a pendulum until this particular line is in alignment with that particular sail. Now again, I want to go ahead and divide this sail in half based on this green, what I'll call a die cutter, okay? So we have to shift click on the sail in the background. Last selected is there from the drop down list before. So once I selected the green, the yellow, secondly, then I can go to path, select division, and now you can see that there are two selection rectangles here. So I have two parts of that sail. Control Z will bring that back, and I can go ahead and modify the color. Let me make that a little bit darker there, and we'll leave this one a little bit lighter. Going over to the layers property window, I'm going to go ahead and turn off the visibility of that first layer so we can kind of see what our sailboat is looking like so far. Okay, looks wonderful. So I'll turn that back on. The next thing I want to work with is making the flagpole. Right, so looking at it, we can see that it's a long skinny rectangle and a circle on top. So we're going to select the rectangle tool. I'm going to click on that, and I'm going to go ahead and click and drag a very long skinny rectangle, and I'm going to go ahead and change that color to an orange from the palette down below so it's easier to see. All right, and we'll go ahead and zoom in on that area where we want to put the circle. If we hold our Control and Shift key, again, our circle will draw. So I want to go ahead and select the circle tool. Our circle will draw when we hold the Control and Shift key in from the center out. All right, and I drew it off center just to show you something with the alignment capabilities. So if I select that particular object, and then secondly, I select the pole itself, and I come over to the Align and Distribute menu. If I wanted to align the center vertical axes of these, and again, because last selected has been chosen, it will align this circle on the pole itself because that was the last selected. So let's go ahead and select Center on Vertical Axis, and that centered it. Now all I need to do is bring that circle down a little bit. So if I select on it, hold a Control key and drag down, you can see my mouse won't move left and right with the object, it just moves it in a straight position. So that looks good. So now we have the ball, and then we have the pole. What we want to do is unify these two objects together so they're one particular object. So again, select the circle, hold the Shift key, select the pole, and then simply go to Path and go to Union. Union then makes the ball and the pole one object, so it will be easier to cut or embroider that at a later time. So let me zoom in closer again, and I can see that there is some space here between the sail and the pole, so I can just very quickly and easily just slide that over. It doesn't have to be perfect, but at least we have a little template here in the background to make that work. So let me just scroll down here and just check it just to make sure it's straight, and it is. So let's go ahead and do the flag next. So the flag is an object. It's a triangle, so we're going to go ahead and select the polygon tool again. Make sure that polygon here is selected, and we have 3 sides. So I'm going to go ahead and hold my control key at this point, so at least it's going to be almost straight here on the bottom. Let's change our color to a red. And again, we need to make that a vector. So let's go Path, Object to Path, and then we'll select our Edit Paths by Nodes tool. And by doing that, let's see if we can rotate that a little bit so that this square edge here will be straight. And go back to our Edit by Nodes tool, and we can go ahead and select these 2 nodes, and then I can stretch both of them out by grabbing the nodes and dragging them. And we'll grab the point here and drag that out. And then we can just grab our nodes individually and line it up to our heart's content. So that looks great. All right, so you can see that the flag is on top of the pole. We're going to show you how to do that a little bit later to place it down under the objects. The last thing I want to do here before we finish the sailboat, let me just turn off that first layer again so we can kind of take a glimpse at how things are looking, and it's just looking wonderful. Looking great. So we'll just hit the visibility button, little eyeball again to turn on the drawing in the background. And what we want to do is make the waves next. So this is going to be a long skinny rectangle once again. So let's select the rectangle, and we're going to click and drag the rectangle, and we want it so it's going to be also below the hull of the boat here. Let's change that to blue. And the next thing we're going to do is change this to a vector. So we're going to go Path, Object to Path, and select our Edit by Nodes tools. And you can see now that we have a node in each corner. Now, one of the nice little tools in Inkscape, if I go ahead and select the 2 top nodes and then go up to the toolbar, there are 2 buttons here that I want to draw your attention to. The first one will insert a new node into the selected segment. And the nice thing about this is every time you click on it, it places a node halfway in between each of the nodes that are selected. This one will actually take nodes away. So if you have an object that you've imported and there's an excessive amount of nodes in there, you can come up here and delete nodes that have been selected, and an object or a cutting machine or an embroidery machine, digitizing software will actually embroider or cut cleaner because there are less nodes. So the less nodes sometimes is better when you're cutting or digitizing your graphics. But what we wanted to do is, again, select these 2 points and come up here, and we're going to add a node in between. And you can see, let me zoom in here, you can see that one node was placed halfway between the nodes that were selected. Now this node automatically becomes selected. So if I select that button again, I should end up with a node halfway between both of these sides. So let's select it again. There it is. And one more time. So now I have a node, the top of each crest of each wave here. So now I just need to make these dips in here, and the easy way to do that is to simply just come in here, because this is a vector graphic now, and we have the node editing tool. We can come in here and just dip these lines down to make our waves. There we go. So the last thing we have to do now is get rid of the bottom of these waves, and we have to get rid of the bottom of the hull of the boat. So that is 2 steps. So we're going to draw two rectangles, one here for the wave, and I'll go ahead and make that pink. And then we're going to draw another one, and we don't have to draw it. We just press Control D to duplicate that because that is larger and longer than the hull of the boat, and we'll make that yellow. We're going to have our selection tool here, and this top one is selected already, so I am going to hold my Shift key down, select the hull of the boat, and then I'm going to go to Path, and I'm going to use that orange rectangle here kind of as a die cutter, and I'm going to have it cut through that bottom hull of the boat by selecting Difference. All right, so the orange is gone, the bottom of the hull is gone, and now we just have the wave left. So select this rectangle, select the waves, and because we had last selected, it's going to cut away from the wave. So I'm going to go to Path, Difference, and here we have our sailboat floating on the water, and there's no extra hull or anything. So let's go ahead and change the opacity of all this back to normal. So I'm just going to select it all, and I'm going to drag this opacity tool all the way back up to 100%. There we go. So here is the final boat. I'm going to go ahead and turn off the visibility of that lower layer, so all I have left showing is the boat itself. And we can see here this flagpole is on top of the boat, so we want to move that down in our layers, and then we also wanted to move the flag. I'm going to go ahead and change this to a green so we can actually see how that happens. So let's go ahead and zoom in on this. I have this flag selected, and I want to lower it between this object here. So if you are used to embroidering, you know that things are embroidered in layers. Well, things are also drawn in layers here with vector graphics. So I am going to go ahead and drop that to the bottom. These four icons on the toolbar lower the selection to the bottom. This will lower the selection here one level at a time. This will raise it one step at a time, and this will raise the object all the way to the top. So we want to go ahead and lower this flag all the way to the bottom. So when I do that, you can see now that the flag has been placed below. Just to be sure, I want to go ahead and click and then shift click on the other sail. I want to force them all the way to the bottom as well, because I don't want them stitching over the top of this flagpole. Now I'm going to go ahead and zoom out here, Control, and use the wheel on my mouse, and I'm going to select this flagpole, and I am going to go ahead and drop that down until this part here that's showing is behind the silver part of this boat. So let's go ahead and lower that, and there we go. That's good enough. So everything here is layered absolutely perfect. It's ready to go ahead and be saved as an SVG file for your cutting machine, or it is able to be saved as SVG file so you can bring the vector graphic into your embroidery digitizing software. Now, if we go to the View menu, go to Display Mode, and go to Outline, you can see now that we have the cutting lines for our cutting machines. Before with the raster graphic, remember it was just a big red X? Well, we don't have that anymore because now we physically have a vector graphic with all the appropriate coordinates to create these different objects. So let's go back to View, Display Mode, Normal. And then the last thing I want to do, since I have everything here, I'm going to go ahead and delete this layer 1 over here because I don't need that graphic under there anymore because I'm perfectly happy and satisfied with this graphic the way it is. So I'm going to select layer 1 where the image was. I'm going to remove that layer, and the only layer I have left is the drawing layer with this graphic. So I'm going to go ahead and say File, save as, and we're going to go ahead and call it sailboat Katie SVG, just so I know that that's the file we're working with. I'll select save. I'll replace the other file. And now this is ready to be saved and sent to your cutting machine, software, or whatever. But what I'd like to do right now is show you how this can be very quickly digitized in the Drawings X Pro software. Okay, so the Drawings X Pro software is not really a digitizing program. It is a vector to stitches conversion program, which I absolutely love because it gives me the capability to actually manipulate the embroidery design as if it were a vector graphic. So let me go ahead and select Create New. This particular software is available on my website. If you are looking for a really easy stitch creation program, it is unlike anything I've ever used, so I'm loving it. I am going to go ahead and go to the File menu, select Import, go to File, and the file I want to import is the sailboatkatie.svg. So when I select that, there's the file that was created. All right, it will always have the black background. When I say Open, what happens is it automatically converts that design to stitches. I mean, it's just absolutely amazing. It is currently almost 6 inches wide and 4.5 inches tall. So if I can come up here and say, well, I want this to fit in my 4 by 4 inch hoop. So I'm just going to make this 3 inches wide, and when I press enter, it will proportionately change that design to the right size because I have proportional selected. Now that's not even the beauty of this program. So if I select this and say ungroup, and let's say I wasn't happy with the way the shape of this particular sail was, let me zoom in. Again, I'm holding Control and rolling the mouse wheel, so a lot of the same functionality is in this as with Inkscape. But if I go to Edit Nodes, just like I did in Inkscape, I can actually modify the graphic, and the stitches are automatically applied. So it's not like a normal digitizing program where you have the graphic underneath and then the stitches are laid on top. This is actually the vector graphic. All right, so I can modify the graphic here. If I didn't like the shape of this particular sail, I could change the shape of any of this vector, and it won't make the changes as if it were the graphic. The usability of how to change stitches. So for example, we have a fill stitch here, but I wanted my flag to be a satin stitch. So because I ungrouped it, I can actually select that object individually, just like in Inkscape, and I can just simply come over here and say I want that to be satin. Here I've got satin stitches going up and down and then left and right. So I'll select this object. I can come over here to the stitch flow, select direction, and then I just click and drag this line here and tell it the direction I want those stitches to stitch. Right? Same thing here. I've got some fill stitches here. If I want the stitches to go at that 45-degree angle and this one to come in the opposite direction. Oops, I didn't select the other side first, so let me just click and drag that side. Click on this side and then click and drag so that it will give some dimension to that embroidery design. It will do that. Now I want to kind of come in here and take a look at this, but you can see the stitches are overlapping here. So it's automatically taking care of the stitch compensation for you. So you don't even have to think about the stitch compensation at all. Let's see, what else can I do to this design? Maybe I want this silvery gray here to be a satin stitch as well. And I want the angle of this particular stitch to be different. And I'm changing it just because I can, not because I have to. And then lastly, I want to change the stitch direction of my waves so that they're going in a vertical position. So I'll select that object. I still have the stitch direction tool selected. If I hold the control key on my keyboard, just like in Inkscape, and then I click and drag, it will draw a straight line. So just click and drag there. Just needs a little adjustment. Some of these may not need adjusting, but I'm just doing it just to show you how easy it is. And then I click my selection tool, and there's a little, it's off here just a little bit, and it could be because of the dip that I had in there. So let's go ahead and go back to our stitch flow, and we're going to add another stitch flow line right here. See, that looks so wonderful. And you know what? It stitches out so much better than it even looks on the screen. So let me show you one more thing. I want to probably put some outlines on some of these objects. I am a I'm just absolute lover of the triple stitch outlines. So if I want to put a triple stitch around this object here, I select it. And instead of a fill, I just simply select outline, go to running, and then here I can tell it I want it to be a triple stitch. And maybe I want the length, instead of a 2.5 millimeter, I'll just take that down to a 0. But you can see the triple stitch that it placed around that looks wonderful, and it's taking care of the compensation automatically as well. So I select the next sail, tell I want to work with the outline. There isn't one, so I'm going to create one by selecting running, choose a triple stitch, and again the length, I'm going to take that down to 2.0. And lastly, I'm going to put a triple stitch around the silver and the aqua. So I'll select that. Tell it I want to outline. There isn't one there because there's no properties here, so I'm going to make one. And then I'm going to change that to a triple stitch. Length of a 2.0 on this design. Just because the design is a little bit smaller, I want a smaller running stitch. And the same thing with the aqua. Select it. There is no outline, so I'm going to make a running stitch. Choose a triple stitch and have a length of 2.0. And I'm loving it, just loving it. All right, so there is my embroidery design. So all I need to do is go to File, Save As, and we're going to call it Sailboat. And it puts an extension of DRAW behind it. And you always want to save that design file, because maybe you want to come in here later and you want to add a name to this boat, or you want to add a baby's name for the bib that you might put this on, or you want to change the size and have several different sizes. So once again, if I select the selection tool, I press Control A to select all, you can see that because the outline was placed around it, it has increased the size by a 0.012. So I can change that back to 3, and it automatically changed the height because everything was proportioned. If I didn't want to be 3 and I want it to fit in my 8-inch hoop, maybe I want the width to be 7.5, it will automatically increase the size of that design. It's just absolutely amazing. Okay, so again, Control A will select all. For my sample here and for the design you will get, I am going to change that back to 3. Then Control, drag the wheel on my mouse to zoom in and out. So this is the design that will be available for you. I will have it in multi-file format. I'm going to go ahead and do a File, Save As, and you can see some of the formats here. Depending on which hoop I have selected for this particular drawing. Let's save it as a DST file, just to make it a little bit more generic. I'll save it as Sailboat DST, and that stitch file is now under 6,000 stitches at 3 inches wide, so that looks wonderful. All right. So I hope you got a little bit of education about the vector conversion software that I use to create my stitches for my embroidery designs. It will also save this file. If I click on Save As, it will save this file as, actually, instead of Save As, I should have went to Export, File Export. It will save it as an SVG file to your cutting machine, or if you have a quilting machine and you want to go ahead and create quilt designs for your quilting machine. So there's a lot of different options in here to use it from. It also has a great rhinestone capability for this software, and we'll talk more later down the road about how simple it is to create an applique design, etc. But I just wanted you to enjoy learning how to draw a design using some unique tools in Inkscape, all right, with circles, rectangles, squares, and triangles, and you end up with a beautiful, simple design that you can put on a nice baby bib or a towel in your boat or in your bathroom. You can customize it later with names, etc. But I want to thank you so much. Visit my website, www.SewingScene.com, to learn more about this software and other tutorials available. If you are just following me now, be sure to go back and look at the other videos, because we kind of work in progression, so you'll learn from the very beginning up to this point. And we're going to get back into fonts and working with those and different techniques with those too. But I wanted to give you something a little more challenging this week with actually drawing something, and our drawings will get a little bit more complicated as we go along. So enjoy. Don't hesitate to drop me a question, and please share the videos with social media. Just go ahead and share them. Tell them you're learning so much. I so appreciate it. The more support I get, the more motivated I am to continue creating these wonderful tutorials for you and helping you become more successful. So my name is Katie Bartz, and again, thank you for joining me. And you can find me at www.SewingScene.com. And we'll see you next time.